The Art of Being Ruled. Wyndham Lewis. Original publication 1926. 1989 edition. Narrated by Skeptical Waves. Part 5. Natures and Puppets. Chapter 5. The Public and the Private Life. What would be the principal difference between a rigidly organized bureaucratic socialist state and a democratic state of get-rich-quick, open competition, parliamentary government, etc.? The difference, where the average male citizen was concerned, would be that the same opportunities would no longer be found for his individual climbing instincts, or commercial push. Fixed in the midst of a carefully regulated hierarchy, his future would be as much earmarked and evident as his past, in the sense that with the automatic graduated salary, rising a few pounds every few years, he would be able to regulate his private life on his life of work, without any likelihood either of interference or, on the other hand, of any accidental and lucky element modifying his destiny spectacularly from one day to the next. In the democratic competitive system, a certain type of energy of a not very valuable sort, except to its possessor, constantly carries men up into the ruling class. That has been happening ever since the establishment of the industrial system. The ruling class becomes more and more a collection of personalities with no traditions, no intellectual training except such as is involved in speculation in stocks and shares or business deals, no religious beliefs usually or any attachments at all in a wider system than that of the stock market or commerce. In a bureaucratic system, inevitably before long a different type of man to this chance jettison of the most brutal sort of success would be evolved. The static nature of the system would not be against it, but on the contrary for it, where the production of a valuable administrative type was concerned. The breezy elasticity of competitive commerce would not be there. Life would not be a lottery anymore. There would be no golden accidents, in which success was usually secured by the least desirable type of being. Sheltered from the coarsening rough and tumble of commercial life, developing freely a religious consciousness of the destinies of their caste, intellectually equipped in a way that no former European rulers have ever been, you would get, to place against the certain disadvantages of a too static system, an inbred and highly organized body of rulers. Access to this caste would be by way of examination, perhaps, at all events, by some other route than the brutal and unsatisfactory one of commercial success. They would form that necessary versatile and universal man above the specialist. That is of course at present in the nature of a myth of the future, but it is just as good a recommendation to say that gods will trace their descent from us, as that we trace our descent from gods. To return to what is happening under our eyes, and which is the first phase of a long process, differentiated from what it supersedes. The spirit of undisciplined enterprise, along freebooting commercial lines, is being crushed out of people by the great concentrations of capital which make it more impossible every day for the small man to advance. Within a few years this process must put a term to individual commercial enterprise. Already the great majority of people are salaried servants of some big trust. Their futures are as cut and dried and predictable as the career of a post office clerk. Let us imagine this system somewhat more consolidated and developed than it is today. It would probably result in a caste system of family trades, on the pattern of India or Egypt, for instance. There would no doubt, in addition to a bureaucracy, be a priesthood, for the present irreligion of the Soviet, for instance, must not be taken as anything but a transitional and destructive phase. Eventually it is not difficult to predict that revolutionary idealism will slip more and more into some religious mold, though it is not likely that the revolutionary handbooks of Christianity, with their Greek idealism, will survive the opening of the millennium. But it is the life of the human average whose destiny we are attempting to trace. The man or woman would have two lives, then as now. There would be the serious life of work, and professionalism, in that section of his or her life, would be as prevalent as ever, and specialization manifest itself as jealously as now. And then, work done, there would be the life of play. But the first thing to notice is that, although it would still be called play, this part of life into which all the cultural activities would be pressed would now be the serious part, just as the dressing and dances are the serious part of a woman's life, the dressing the preparation of the goods for the market, and conveyed on foot, by taxi, or bus to the dance hall, the marketplace. Whereas now in the recreative life the majority of people are quite content to find their pleasure in the convenient relay of spectator, then they would insist on a competitive activity. Whereas today, although that today is fast approximating itself to the not very distant future we are describing, the workaday business and money-making life, in which a man is proud of being good at his job, and sets his vanity on that, is the serious one, then the arena would be what is now the private life of recreation and amusement. Whereas now competition, at least for a man, is confined, in a serious form, to his working business life, then the competitive instincts would find their full expression outside in the world of play. An aesthetic ideal would be substituted, in short, for a masculine abstract one, a personal for an impersonal. If you go into a smoking compartment today in an underground train, you find yourself surrounded by men, a very different humanity, as you gaze round at their serious, free, unself-conscious faces, ignorant of the grace that they have never sought beneath their raw hides, to what you would find in a compartment full of women. This will very rapidly change. These men that you can examine today on their way home in the evening have left their best life, their life of work, behind them. In the future they will under such circumstances have just left a mechanical dream life of duty, and be expanding and becoming themselves as they approach the seat of their private and personal life. At least this description will apply to the most active and ambitious. But today the development of colossal industries has already driven off the field most of the crowd of small, ambitious men, the energetic minority of climbers and get-rich-quicks. All outlet to their competitive and ambitious instincts is already occluded. In the human machinery of a large establishment, as in the government services, zeal is not encouraged. An ambitious individual, with a devouring energy and fond of work, will hardly find an outlet for that energy in future in business. For any display made of that energy among his fellow workers in a large anonymous industry would cause him to be regarded with disfavor, and he would gain nothing by it at all. There is one way open to each individual today, the sort who in the days before the ascendancy of the cartels and trusts would unscrupulously fight his way up to the top of the tree. This career of the business climber, where as a sort of legitimate criminal he could plunder his way up, is closed for all and sundry, or is rapidly closing. Only lawless and criminal activity, blackmail, poison, and the revolver will soon be left him. Already today the difficulties put in the way of a man who yesterday, as a small business crook, of small but distinct predatory energy, would make money in business, are so vexatious that he is forced to become openly a criminal. In this way, of course, many a small-scale bird of prey is brought to light, smoked out of his business labyrinth by the advance of the anonymous power of the trust and syndicate. The blocking up of the avenues by which the competitive instinct vented itself, and the crushing uniformity of fortune in which, in the salaried industrial armies of today, it has no play, is one of the circumstances that force these energies back into the non-working life, with many of the more energetic small-scale competitive people, into crime, and with others, less energetic into sport and life tout court, the social life. Meantime press suggestion hammers at this discomforted little man. Don't worry, Mr. Everyman, never worry. Life, so the scientists tell us, is a small mechanical affair, pleasure is the only reality. Competition and the cares of state and success are all very well. But for simple people like you and me a quiet, secure life is what we want, isn't it? If your insurances are paid up, your home bought, an aerial installed, the hire purchase payments kept up, a week arranged for at Worthing or Southend, or if you are near a nice city park, with sand pits for the kids, if you have a motorbike, etc., etc., well, life is not so dusty. Pleasure, or the home life, is the thing. Of course, art and culture are introduced as further baits usually into these exordiums. A keep off the grass notice where the wielding of ambitions is concerned, or the great prizes of the world, that whole enclosed realm of power and government, warns Mr. Everyman of changed times. But he is recommended to approximate as nearly as possible to a gentleman of leisure and cultured tastes, reduced to earning his living from 9 to 6 every day. Never mind. He can be cultivated, and Mrs. Everyman can be refined, for the rest of the time. Round these abstract flames, one cold and repellent beyond description, the other gay with promises, the William Morris world, the happy valley, the eternal spring, of an electioneering poster the multitudes of moths press and strain. This is of course the democratic humbug of the what the public wants system. A sort of sugar-sweet misinterpretation of the period of medieval rebirth, when everything was happy and the workshops were full of songs, and craftsmen jostled with amateur masons, is sketched. The world's great age begins anew, the golden years return, is, in lyrical language, the message of this political afflatus. It is true that action would still be the catchword of this new paradise. Only, the mechanical dogma of action, or the vitalist dogma of life, would be turned back on the world of play and the private life of the individual. It would be discouraged thereby, or led gently away, from any designs it might have in the world of business, or what has so far been regarded as real activity. Men and women would in this way both be thrown back into what is today still the conventional woman's world. It is true that men, as well as women, dress, go to dances, and so forth. And it is true that these occupations already take on a seriousness, an art for art's sake air, which is novel, and very pleasantly novel. Where it is unpleasant it is owing to the inevitable cheapness injected into everything by what the public wants. Still, the world in which love is manufactured, and young homes built, the race perpetuated, is still conventionally regarded as the woman's province, and the day's work as the man's. When you are dealing with the world in the sense of the social world, it was said above, you are dealing strictly with a woman's world. And so in the humbler world of the great crowds, all that is not ambitious and competitive money-making and breadwinning has been generally regarded as a feminine province. The wholesale invasion of that province, and the fusion of the relics of the two regions, is what the war and its sequel has resulted in. Already the bridges are built by which the psychology of the masses, with the weakening of the deep sex distinction and sex barriers, will pass back to the conventional female pole, or transfer their energies in that direction. The old man's world of the abstract, non-personal, non-feminine, life of the earlier European is, then, today, rapidly becoming extinct. The power of money and the vast interlocked organization of big business has gradually withdrawn all initiative from individual males. Bourgeois or parliamentary politics is today such a thin camouflage, so harassed, pointless, and discredited. The puppets have so little executive power. Lord Curzon is reported to have said shortly before he died, for example, that he had not enough power to send a messenger across Whitehall, that politics no longer afford an outlet for energy comparable for a moment with the opportunities of a game of tennis or a flirtation. Hence every one, ambitious in other ways or not, is sent indiscriminately to the salon or the playing field or dance hall, and that is the only real battlefield left for masculine or feminine ambition. Private life, in short, has taken the place of public life. That this is a very sad thing for many people is certain. For such a man as the Marquis Curzon to find himself starved of what he so hungered for, power, over other people, to send them not only across Whitehall, but to the galleys, or anywhere else in or out of this world, is a sad disappointment. But the people who want this sort of power are not very interesting, often by no means so worthy of notice as the people over whom they exercise it. Again, it is a very sad thing that no office boy today can be very sanguine about ending his life a magnate. It is no longer so easy, in fact it becomes more difficult every day, to get on in this sensational way in commerce. That is very pathetic, but K-office boy and quay magnate people are not necessarily worthy of notice, nor as the latter does a man recommend himself more to us than as the former, unless he showers his wealth on us, which is very unusual. So that politics and business should have closed down on aspirants to honors and great wealth is not such a very great tragedy. But of course that is not the end of it, and all this energy bursts up in other directions. But it does not follow, because as political or commercial specialists these men were not necessarily very interesting, that as social specialists they are more so. Probably they are even better at their masculine tasks than at their feminine ones. What has been gained is this. In the former democratic, parliamentary regime, and regime of open competition, all the machinery of society worked in public. The ambitious public specialist was watched by millions, his speeches quoted with great care, his bold financial undertakings eagerly noted. Now all this will go underground. We shall never be bothered with real live politics or commerce again. At least, we shall suffer them, but have no part in them. The accounts of them in the newspapers will become more and more unreal and meaningless and difficult to follow, and then eventually they will disappear altogether. The results will appear, however, in social life. Enormous pearls will collect on the necks of ladies, reaching their necks from nowhere, for it is unlikely that wealth will be explicit. All the ponderable forces of the world will be occult, and only flower mysteriously in social phenomena such as pearls and motorcars. As though waited on by genii, favored persons will flourish in social life, and their power, instead of revealing its larva stages to the world, and parading its vermiform public shape in politics and industry, will appear in its final butterfly transformation as a social phenomenon. For those who, like great artists and others, love shapes of masculine splendor and power, bell-heel mirrors, prophets, visions of infernos and so forth, and on whom the finished social article, the eternal butterfly, is likely to pall for them also, beyond this phase, there will be others, no doubt, in which eventually, like a tremendous serpent, power once more issues from its subterranean retreat, and asserts itself again in massive magnificence. But that of course is very distant. The joys of the Leviathan are not for us. What at least will be gained for the moment is that all the decaying and unsightly publicity of imperfect power will disappear. And when the social world organizes itself as the only serious world, it will be very different to the place it is at present, and will remain, until the occult political machinery is consolidated.